I'm Colonel Geordie Beale of the 48th Highlanders of Canada. Welcome to our Regimental Museum. The 48th Highlanders was formed in 1891 as a reserve infantry battalion of the Canadian Army, located in downtown Toronto. The museum, located in St. Andrew's Church, shows our history through the uniforms and the accoutrements of the soldiers and Highlanders through the entire period. Over 70% of our artifacts, we know the name of the Highlander behind them, so we can tell you not only the story of the artifact, but the story of a 48th Highlander who used it. Our traditional uniforms are Highland dress. Since Toronto's population in 1891 was 28% Scot, either first or second generation. This is the actual uniform of our first commanding officer, Colonel John Davidson. In his honor, we wear the Davidson tartan, and on our badges is the falcon, central to his family crest. We still wear this uniform today, one of fewer than 5 regiments in Canada with their Highland dress. You can see us on Remembrance Day and other key events in downtown Toronto. In the First World War, the 15th Battalion, 48th Highlanders, went overseas in 1914 with the 1st Canadian contingent. We were always first, going over when requested. And the 15th Battalion received 21 battle honors for their actions during the war. You name a battle, we were probably there. And the 15th Battalion was a battalion gassed by the first chlorine gas attack of the war by the Germans, losing over 660 soldiers in one day, killed, wounded, or missing in action. Let's look at a couple of personal items of the First World War. This bugle was blown on the 11th of November at the 11th hour by Sergeant Worry Twos. He was told to blow the appropriate tune. He did. But the soldiers didn't recognize that the armistice had been signed and thought it might be a call to lunch early. They came out with their mess tins. We understand he was not delighted. This tie with the pipe cleaner through the knot was worn by Captain Beaver Reid, who was wounded on the battlefield. When the stretcher bearers came out to take him away, they said, "We'll undo this tie and take it so that you can take it with you." He said, "No, don't undo it. Cut it off at the back so that I can show where the German bullet missed me." In the Second World War, the 1st Battalion, 48th Highlanders, went overseas in 1939, again with the 1st Canadian contingent. Through the war, they won 27 battle honors for their actions in Sicily, Italy, and the final liberation of Holland in 1945. So this is the uniform of Brigadier Ian Johnston. He was commanding officer when he took us through the battles at Sicily and Italy up to the vaunted Hitler line, a line that Hitler said could never be broken. It stretched between Monte Cairo and the Liri Valley. The 48th broke it alone under his leadership, and for that he was promoted to brigadier. By the end of the war, he was acting major general, and he stayed on after the war to participate in the Nuremberg trials. Here he is with King George VI, reviewing the troops. Let's look at a couple of personal items used by Highlanders during the war. This item is the shaving kit of Sergeant Herb Pike of Able Company, became CQMS of Support Company at the end of the war. And we have several watercolor paintings by Lieutenant Matheson. This one is of Cemetery Hill, which is in December 1943, was when the 48th Highlanders penetrated 2,500 kilometers behind the German lines in single file at night, setting up an all-round defensive position that outflanked Ortona and caused the Germans to retreat and leave the town. This is our Vimy Cross, probably one of the most important artifacts in the museum. It was erected on the battlefield by the regimental carpenter on the night of 10-11 April 1917, the day after the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Names above the words "killed in action" are those buried at this location, and those found later in the day were moved and buried here. We are fortunate in that we have 2 sets of medals of soldiers whose names are on this cross. Private Neely and Private Jensen. Interestingly, of the thousands of crosses that were on the battlefield for the 3,600 Canadian soldiers who died in 1917, only 5 crosses remain. When the War Graves Commission decided to consolidate all the graves to one specific location, they asked regiments in Canada, did they want their cross? They received only 5 answers. The rest were destroyed. And in 2017, we arranged to return this cross to the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge to Vimy, where it was placed on the exact battlefield at the exact location when the Prime Minister and dignitaries opened and celebrated the 100th anniversary. Since the Second World War, the 48th have had volunteers in every United Nations or NATO commitment that Canada had. This map shows where they have been. For Afghanistan, so many Highlanders volunteered, some multiple times, that we received our 50th Battle Honor. And there are Highlanders overseas today, continuing their history and their tradition of volunteering for service. On a personal basis, this is the sweatshirt that Private Tessioni was wearing underneath his uniform when he was in Yugoslavia. You can see it was removed from him as he was shot 7 times by the Serbs in his UN activity, proving once again that peacekeeping is dangerous. After hospital, Tessioni returned to the unit and became a sergeant. No discussion of the 40th Highlanders would be complete without details of the famous 40th Highlanders pipes and drums. Since 1891, the pipes and drums have traveled all across North America and Canada, US, and in Europe, and for the last century have competed in competitions around the world. This is a drummer wearing the Davidson tartan, as the rest of the regiment does. In 1913, the pipers, for reasons they have yet to disclose, switched to the Stewart of Fingask tartan, which they wear to this day. Our most famous pipe major was Pipe Major Fraser. He had started as a member of the Gordon Highlanders as a private in 1893 and was at the Battle of Dargai. And when the regiment needed a new pipe major in 1913, he emigrated to Canada and served with the regiment and the pipes and drums to 1951. In St. Andrew's Church are many items built into the church that reflect the heritage of the 48th Highlanders since 1891. This stained glass window, donated in 1937, shows a Highlander in full dress. And the window shows the dimension of family that the regiment has always called the regiment. The person who posed for this stained glass window was a sergeant in the First World War by the name of Elms. In the Second War, his son was Regimental Sergeant Major Bill Elms, and later on, his grandson was honorary colonel of the regiment. On either side of the Highlander are 2 famous historic biblical warriors, King David, he of the slewing of Goliath, and Joseph of the walls of Jericho. And above them are the soldiers of the 15th Battalion, 48th Highlanders. This plaque, also erected on the walls of St. Andrew's Church, describes the second dimension of why the 48th consider themselves a family regiment. It displays the bond between soldiers. The plaque's very simple. It's to Private John Barry. Barry was the driver to our commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Ian Johnson, through Sicily and Italy, including the breaking of the Hitler line. When Johnson was promoted to brigadier and was to leave the regiment, Barry, who had already received enough points to return to Canada to his real family, asked could he stay and be his driver. Johnson agreed. Several months later, Barry was backing his Jeep off the road and hit a mine, killing him instantly. When asked about the plaque, Colonel Johnson pointed it out, and they said, "But sir, you have not signed it." And he said, "Oh, you must look closer." And at the bottom, he pointed out, it is signed, "The Tribute of a Comrade." And this is how we in the museum explain to the public who have never been in the military the bond that exists between soldiers. A private, the lowest rank, and lieutenant colonel, the highest. The tribute of a comrade. In the chancel of St. Andrew's Church is this memorial communion table, donated in 1934 by the sergeants of the 48th Highlanders. It was designed and supervised by a gentleman by the name of John Pearson. He was the architect who designed the existing Parliament buildings after they burned in the early 1900s. And you can see the 48th and the St. Andrew's traditions built into it. On the right is the 48th Highlanders crest. On the left, the Canadian flag, maple leaves. And in the center, the St. Andrew's Cross. And in each panel is a flower representing each of the 10 countries of what was then called the British Empire. It's made of Canadian oak, and at the end of it is the Book of Remembrance, which we turn a page of every year. And every soldier who was killed in action with the 48th Highlanders in the First and Second World Wars' name is upon these. So visit our museum. It's free. It's run totally by volunteers and supported through donations. Ask our volunteers questions. They have information behind each and every item and can tell you the stories of the Highlanders who used them. We're located in St. Andrew's Church in downtown Toronto. It's easy to get to. But if you can't come in person, go to our website. There you will find instructions as to how to get here and when we're open. You'll also see a Google map. You can actually go through the museum on a Google tour. We also have information on over 8,600 48th Highlanders. So if you have a relative who was a Highlander from 1891 to today, ask us. We'll help you with the research for free. Come on down to the museum. We look forward to seeing you.